Mexico is building an 800-kilometer water pipeline that will climb over 2,500 meters through some of the most brutal mountain ranges on Earth. Every single day, this massive system will pump enough water to fill 50 Olympic swimming pools, moving it from the lush tropical south to the parched north and center where 30 million people are running out of time. The pipeline will cross active earthquake zones, tunnel through solid rock for over 80 kilometers, and require 18 massive pumping stations consuming enough electricity to power a city of 500,000 people. Keep watching because you're about to discover whether this is the engineering breakthrough that saves Mexico or a disaster waiting to happen. Did you know that Mexico City is sinking into the earth at 50 centimeters per year? The capital, home to over 21 million people, was built on an ancient lake bed, and for decades they've been pumping groundwater so aggressively that the entire city is collapsing into itself. Buildings crack, streets buckle, and water pipes burst as the land subsides. But that's just the beginning of Mexico's water nightmare. Right now, over 20 million people across central Mexico face severe water shortages. In neighborhoods throughout Mexico City, water only flows from taps on certain days of the week. Families wake up at 3 a.m. to fill every container they can find before the water stops again. In the northern states like Nuevo León, home to the industrial powerhouse of Monterrey, reservoirs have dropped to just 15% capacity during recent droughts. Farmers watch their fields turn to dust while their livestock die of thirst. The cruel irony is that southern Mexico has too much water. States like Veracruz, Tabasco, and Chiapas receive massive rainfall and are crossed by powerful rivers that eventually empty into the Gulf of Mexico. While the north burns under drought and the center slowly sinks from overpumping, the south literally floods every rainy season, wasting billions of cubic meters of fresh water that flows unused into the ocean. This isn't just inequality, it's a geographic tragedy that's tearing the country apart. For decades, Mexico tried everything to solve this crisis, and nothing worked. They drilled deeper wells, extracting groundwater from aquifers that took thousands of years to form. But every liter they pulled from below made the sinking worse. The Chalco-Tláhuac aquifer beneath Mexico City has lost over 40 meters of water level since 1950. The land is literally eating itself. They built desalination plants along the coasts, hoping to turn seawater into salvation, but the energy costs were staggering. Each cubic meter of desalinated water requires about 4 kilowatt-hours of electricity, and transporting it inland through mountains requires even more power. For a country trying to meet carbon reduction targets, this was unsustainable. Small regional pipelines were constructed, connecting nearby water sources to thirsty cities. But these were band-aids on a hemorrhaging wound. Water recycling programs were launched with great fanfare, treating wastewater for reuse in agriculture and industry. These helped, but they only addressed a fraction of the demand. Meanwhile, proposals for new dams faced fierce opposition from environmental groups and indigenous communities who'd already been displaced too many times. Water trucks became a common sight in Mexico City neighborhoods, private companies charging desperate families premium prices for basic survival. But this patchwork system was collapsing under its own weight. Mexico needed something bigger, bolder, more ambitious than anything they'd tried before. They needed to move water on a scale that would make rivers jealous. The plan is stunning in its ambition. An 800-kilometer water pipeline system starting in the water-rich southern states of Veracruz and Chiapas, crossing the Sierra Madre Oriental mountain ranges, and delivering fresh water to Mexico City, Monterrey, and the agricultural heartland in between. This isn't just a pipe, it's an artificial river flowing uphill through some of the most challenging terrain on the planet. The main pipeline will be 3.5 meters in diameter, large enough to drive a small car through, made of steel-reinforced concrete designed to withstand pressures of up to 200 bars. The system will move approximately 300 million cubic meters of water annually, enough to meet the daily needs of over 10 million American households. To put that in perspective, that's more water than flows through the entire Colorado River aqueduct that supplies Southern California. But here's where it gets mind-blowing. The pipeline has to climb from near sea level in Veracruz, up and over mountain passes at 2,500 meters elevation, then down into central Mexico. That vertical lift is equivalent to stacking 9 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. Water doesn't naturally flow uphill, so this requires engineering on a scale that most countries wouldn't dare attempt. The route itself is a masterpiece of problem solving. Engineers planned it to follow natural valleys where possible, minimizing the amount of mountainous terrain. But over 80 kilometers will have to be bored as tunnels straight through solid rock. avoiding the most unstable slopes and seismic zones. These aren't small tunnels. They're massive excavations requiring tunnel boring machines as large as buildings, each costing over $50 million. Construction teams will build dedicated access roads to remote mountain locations where no roads currently exist, establishing worker camps that will house up to 15,000 people at peak construction. The logistics alone are staggering. Millions of tons of concrete, steel, and equipment hauled into mountain wilderness, often by helicopter when roads can't reach. To make water flow uphill against gravity, Mexico is building 18 massive pumping stations along the pipeline route. These aren't ordinary pump houses. Each one is an industrial complex with pumps the size of buses, powered by electric motors generating 15 to 25 megawatts each. Combined, these stations will consume approximately 180 megawatts continuously, about the same electricity usage as a city of 600,000 people. The energy requirements are so enormous that the project includes plans for dedicated power generation. 3 new natural gas plants and 2 massive solar farms with battery storage are part of the supporting infrastructure. The solar installations alone will cover over 4,000 hectares, roughly the size of 7,500 football fields, making them among the largest solar projects in Latin America. Each pumping station requires redundant systems. If one pump fails, others immediately compensate to maintain constant pressure and flow. The pipeline is divided into sections with isolation valves every 20 kilometers. So if there's a leak or rupture, only one section needs to shut down while repairs happen. Advanced monitoring systems track pressure, flow rate, temperature, and water quality at thousands of points along the route, with control centers analyzing data 24 hours a day. At both ends, massive water treatment facilities ensure quality. The intake stations in southern Mexico filter out sediment and organic matter from rivers, treating the water to drinking standards before it enters the pipeline. At the receiving end in Mexico City and Monterrey, additional treatment and storage reservoirs can hold up to 500 million liters, buffering supply during maintenance or emergencies. The estimated cost for all of this? Between $18 and $25 billion, making it one of the most expensive infrastructure projects in Mexican history. Construction timeline projections range from 8 to 12 years, assuming no major delays from protests, legal challenges, or funding gaps. For comparison, that's about twice the cost of the entire Mexico City metro system, which took 50 years to build. If completed, this pipeline could transform Mexico's future. Water security for over 30 million people means families won't have to wake before dawn to catch a few hours of running water. It means hospitals can function properly, schools can maintain hygiene, and businesses won't have to shut down during water rationing. Agriculture could revive across 5 million hectares of farmland that's currently marginal or abandoned due to drought. Mexican farmers could grow enough food to reduce dependence on imports, strengthening food security and rural economies. Crops like corn, beans, tomatoes, and peppers that Mexico exports globally could expand production, generating billions in additional revenue. The construction phase alone creates over 200,000 jobs spanning a decade. Engineers, welders, heavy equipment operators, concrete workers, tunnel specialists, logistics coordinators, and support staff. Once operational, the system requires 50,000 permanent employees for monitoring, maintenance, security, and water management. That's 50,000 stable, well-paying technical jobs in regions that desperately need economic opportunity. Government economists project the pipeline could generate over $50 billion in economic benefits over 20 years through increased agricultural output, industrial expansion, reduced water truck costs, and stabilized real estate values in areas currently suffering water insecurity. It could reduce migration from drought-stricken regions, keeping families in their communities rather than forcing them toward already overcrowded cities or the United States border. There's even an environmental argument. By providing abundant surface water, Mexico could finally stop the suicidal over-extraction of groundwater that's destroying aquifers and causing Mexico City to sink. The land subsidence crisis could stabilize within a generation, saving countless historic buildings and preventing infrastructure disasters. If successful, Mexico's mega pipeline becomes a model for other water-stressed nations. California's droughts, Middle Eastern water scarcity, and Australia's inland aridity all face similar challenges. Mexico could export not just the engineering plans, but the entire operating model, positioning itself as a global leader in water infrastructure technology. But here's the harsh truth that keeps engineers awake at night. Mega projects this ambitious rarely come in on budget or on schedule. The initial $18 to $25 billion estimate could easily balloon to 40 billion or more when cost overruns hit, and they always hit. Unexpected geological challenges, inflation, contractor disputes, and design changes can double costs. That debt burden falls on future generations of Mexican taxpayers, who'll be paying interest for decades. Then there's the operational reality. Pumping 300 million cubic meters of water annually up 2,500-meter mountains requires absolutely massive energy consumption. Even with dedicated power plants, the electricity costs alone could reach $500 million per year. If energy prices spike, or carbon taxes increase as climate policy tightens globally, operating this pipeline becomes financially unsustainable. Who pays when the costs exceed the benefits? The environmental concerns are even more troubling. Extracting 300 million cubic meters annually from rivers in Veracruz and Chiapas will noticeably reduce downstream flow. Wetlands that depend on these rivers will shrink. Fish populations will decline. Ecosystems that evolved over thousands of years will face stress they've never experienced. Local communities who rely on these rivers for fishing, transportation, and irrigation will see their livelihoods damaged. The construction phase itself is an environmental disaster. Building 80 kilometers of mountain tunnels and laying 800 kilometers of pipeline means destroying pristine forests, displacing wildlife, fragmenting habitats, and scarring mountainsides with roads and industrial sites. The carbon footprint from all that concrete steel production and diesel-powered construction equipment runs into millions of tons. Ironic for a project claiming environmental benefits, but perhaps the most dangerous risks are political. The southern states providing the water are already pushing back hard. Veracruz's governor has publicly questioned why his state should sacrifice its water resources to solve problems created by unsustainable development in Mexico City and the north. Indigenous communities in Chiapas, who've suffered through decades of displacement for dams and development projects, are organizing resistance movements. Water rights in Mexico are governed by a complex mix of federal, state, and local laws. Constitutional battles are brewing over whether the federal government can unilaterally take water from one region and pipe it to another. Legal challenges could tie up the project in courts for years, and there's no guarantee the federal government will win. There's also the security nightmare. An 800-kilometer pipeline crossing remote mountain terrain becomes a target. Drug cartels could sabotage sections to extort payment or make political statements. Environmental activists opposed to the project could damage infrastructure to force shutdowns. A single breach in a high-pressure section could release millions of liters before emergency systems engage, flooding valleys and causing deaths. And what happens when political winds shift? A future administration with different priorities could cut funding mid-construction, leaving half-finished pump stations and empty pipelines rusting in the mountains. A $20 billion monument to political failure. Or worse, a populist government could decree that water from the pipeline should be free, making operation financially impossible and causing the entire system to collapse. Right now, the mega pipeline exists mostly in feasibility studies, environmental impact assessments, and political debates. Engineering consultants from Mexican firms, along with international companies from China, Spain, and Germany, have completed preliminary route surveys and cost estimates. But environmental impact reviews are facing legal challenges from affected communities and environmental organizations. Political divisions run deep. The federal government, eager for a legacy project, pushes forward, but several state governors, especially in the water source regions, are threatening lawsuits and legislative roadblocks. Funding mechanisms remain unclear. Will this be financed through government bonds, international development loans, or public-private partnerships? Each option has different implications for who profits and who loses. Some preliminary work has begun. Land acquisition processes started in certain sections, with government surveyors marking routes and beginning negotiations with property owners. But progress is slow and contentious. Farmers don't want to sell their land for what they consider unfair prices, and expropriation battles are ugly and protracted. Expert engineers, including several who worked on China's South-North Water Transfer Project, the only comparable water megaproject successfully completed, have raised concerns. They question whether Mexico has the institutional capacity to manage a project this complex. They warn that the seismic activity along the route creates risks that aren't fully understood. They point to failed water megaprojects in Libya, Iran, and India as cautionary tales of what happens when ambition exceeds capability. Timeline delays have already appeared. even before major construction begins. Original projections suggested groundbreaking by 2025, but that's been pushed to 2027 at the earliest. And if history is any guide, that date will slip further as legal battles, funding negotiations, and political complications multiply. Mexico's mega pipeline has captured international attention like few infrastructure projects ever do. China's state-owned construction firms, experienced from their own massive water transfer project, have expressed strong interest in securing contracts. The technical expertise and financing they could bring is attractive, but it also raises sovereignty concerns about foreign control over critical water infrastructure. The United States is watching with particular interest, partly because water scarcity in northern Mexico directly impacts migration patterns, and partly because Mexico's project could set precedents for Colorado River negotiations. California has studied similar schemes to move water from the Pacific Northwest, and Mexico's success or failure will influence those debates. International development banks, including the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, are evaluating whether to provide financing. But they're demanding strict environmental safeguards and social impact mitigation that could add billions to costs and years to timelines. Environmental groups have launched global campaigns, framing the pipeline as an example of dangerous megaproject thinking that destroys ecosystems to feed unsustainable urban growth. Other water-stressed nations from Australia to Chile to Morocco are studying Mexico's approach. If this pipeline succeeds, it proves that moving water over mountains at continental scale is achievable, opening possibilities for similar projects worldwide. If it fails, it reinforces skepticism about megaproject solutions to climate-driven water scarcity. Engineering journals and conferences buzz with debate. Some experts see genuine innovation in the pumping station design and tunnel construction techniques. Others dismiss the entire concept as physically and economically implausible. Comparisons to China's South-North Water Transfer Project are constant, but that project moves water across relatively flat terrain, not over mountain ranges exceeding 2,500 meters. So here we are, with one of the most audacious engineering projects of the 21st century. Hovering between blueprint and reality. The 800-kilometer pipeline that could save 30 million people from water scarcity or become a multi-billion-dollar failure that deepens Mexico's debt crisis while destroying southern ecosystems. Will Mexico complete this impossible pipeline, creating artificial rivers that flow uphill through mountains, proving that human engineering can overcome geography itself? Or will this project collapse under the weight of its own ambition, brought down by cost overruns, environmental resistance, political infighting, and technical challenges that no country has successfully solved at this scale? Could this pipeline trigger water wars between Mexican states, pitting regions against each other in constitutional battles over resource rights? Might it set a precedent for global water redistribution, showing other countries that long-distance water transfer is possible even through the most brutal terrain? Or will it stand as a cautionary tale, a warning about megaproject hubris and the limits of what money and technology can actually achieve? What do you think? Is this a visionary solution that future generations will celebrate, or a reckless gamble that's doomed to fail? Leave a comment below with your prediction. Will Mexico complete this pipeline, or will it become another abandoned megaproject? Hit that like button if the scale of this engineering challenge shocked you. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is still unfolding. We'll be tracking every development, every setback, every breakthrough as Mexico attempts the impossible. You won't want to miss what happens next in this battle between human ambition and the forces of nature and economics.